Who's going to the Super Bowl? We're going to pick the conference championship games today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5.
Joe, happy National East-West Shrine Game Eve from a start of events perspective. Happy National Kyle gets ready to go on a plane tomorrow day to you as well.
May your seat adjacent to you be empty.
Oh, that reminds I pick seats when I booked, but I don't remember strategically what seat that I picked.
Oh.
We'll see.
Yeah. You'll find out.
It's the good news is it's only a 3-hour flight. And I'll probably sleep.
Sleep? You can sleep on a plane?
I'll sleep anywhere when I'm getting as little sleep as I've been getting this past 2 years of my life. 2 years of my life with 2 kids.
Yeah, I could. I don't think I could sleep on a plane, but
you couldn't conk yourself out if you took something beforehand.
Yeah, if I took something beforehand, but
help you out.
I'd be a little bit nervous. I would feel like, man, like I'm sitting there sleeping on the plane, like what's going on? You know, like what I gotta
have your wits about you.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I don't want to be
35,000 feet above the ground.
Maybe sawing logs, you know. Don't want to.
All right. Well, listen. Some news came out yesterday. We always intended to use Thursday to preview the conference championship games, which we are going to do. Commanders and Eagles, Bills and Chiefs. But we also had Jacksonville making a better late than never move, I suppose. And the Jets made their first choice in their new direction. So we're going to get into all that here today on the show. But Joe, we're going to start with Bills and Chiefs in the latest of this saga that feels like this generation's version of what Manning Brady was in the playoffs.
4th postseason meeting between Allen and Mahomes. The most ever is Brady and Manning, like you mentioned. They did it 5 times. So that'll happen next year. I mean, this is kind of great
of you to assume Kansas City will
be back. 7 AFC Championship appearances in a row. I got a feeling that, grass is green, water is wet, and Kansas City is going to be right back in this position next year. And obviously the Bills are in this position for the first time since 2020, and it certainly feels different. That was kind of right when the Bills kind of ascended, and you felt like there was going to be a lot of opportunity, and there has been a lot of opportunity, but this is also the first time since they've been back to this moment, and the urgency feels pretty high for Buffalo to get this done. I mean, the Chiefs have won the previous 3 matchups in the postseason. The Bills have won the last 4 in the regular season, and it's so empty. It's so empty that they haven't been able to do it in the postseason. So this is their next opportunity, and boy, it would be a tough pill to swallow if once again the Bills' season is ended by Kansas City.
Yeah. So the line on this game over at FanDuel, is it 2 or 1.5?
1.5.
Still sitting at 1.5.
Yep. Hasn't moved.
Has not moved. So this is, and most of these games, regardless of when they have played, have been very slim margin type of games. So whether it's a regular season contest and you're got an illegal formation by Kadarius Toney,
take away greatness,
or 13 seconds, or like that whole end of spectrum, right? Like you've gotten on all sides, but these games have always been really tight, and I don't think you should expect anything different this time around. Obviously, Kansas City playing at home. But when you get into matchups, I do think Buffalo has a number of favorable matchups. And to me, it comes down to Josh Allen. And the good news is you look at how he plays against Kansas City, and he's played Kansas City really well in the regular season when they've won the games. And statistically, he's even better when they play in the playoffs. They just lose. They're averaging like 6 more points per game in the playoffs when they play, and they just haven't won the game.
Yeah, it's been some circumstances that have gotten in the way, whether it's missed kicks or ridiculous management of that 13 seconds or drops. I mean, it hasn't gone the Bills' way despite playing well enough to win. I think that's the big takeaway when you look at any of those matchups. They've had the capacity to do it. It hasn't been that issue. It's just circumstantially they've got to be able to figure it out. And certainly they haven't been able to limit Mahomes in the postseason. And that's been the biggest problem. They haven't been able to affect him nearly to the degree that they have during the regular season. And so I'm curious, while I do believe that the Bills do have a number of matchup advantages, I think their run game is going to be big in this one. I think the tight ends, Kansas City has given up the most yards to tight ends this year. They got certainly some opportunities to attack there. I think Josh has shown a really good feel against Spagnuolo and the blitz schemes and really anticipatory stuff. All of that's good, but it won't matter if the Bills can't get some stops on defense, and that's been the issue against Mahomes in the postseason, where he's absolutely lit the Bills up. And week 11, the Bills did a great job. I thought it was their best effort yet, rushing Mahomes and showing a cage rush, and they kind of break out this odd mirror where they go 3-2-6 and commit really 4 to 5 guys to the pocket where it's not a dime, but with 2 backers still, and kind of using Milano or Bernard or Williams to be that mirror player on Mahomes, which gives them some margin for error with their rush. And, it's not a true spy. It's more of a mirror role. And so Can they incorporate that stuff and get enough pressure on Mahomes? That's what I'm fascinated to find out.
Yeah, I think the matchup when Kansas City has the ball is interesting for me too, because you look at how Kansas City played against Houston. And I think you have to put every quarterback performance through a different lens when they played against Houston this year, right? Because that defense was the real deal.
Yeah, I think Josh went 9 of 30 against Houston.
Yeah, and what? Goff threw 5 picks,
yeah,
two threw 3 picks. Herbert threw 4 picks.
Right.
Just some productive quarterbacks, varying degrees of good to great spectrum. All had really bad games playing against. So Pat goes 16 to 25 for 177. They have one wide receiver who catches a pass in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's sustainable against Buffalo because you're going to need to score points, but I also don't think Buffalo will replicate that. So for me, if Kansas City is going to solve this riddle, Kelsey's going to get his.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Juju Smith-Schuster / DeAndre Hopkins / Hollywood Brown. Like, who's the other player that steps up? And if you get a guy in a matchup and you can win that matchup with some consistency, I think that's what has to happen if Kansas City's going to win the game.
I'm interested. I think both of these teams in their divisional round wins, they played that compression style of game where, Josh was 16 to 22 for 127 yards. That was good enough to win. He didn't throw a passing touchdown.
Yep.
So they both kind of had these compression style wins where, all right, we're just going to play the game. The other team's going to beat themselves, and we'll get out of this thing with the win. I don't know if that's going to be the recipe for either team. I think someone's going to have to go take it this week. And Mahomes is certainly comfortable in that arena. He always does. And so the matchups, I think a lot in this game favors Buffalo. It really does. But it's Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce with a
at home in the conference championship game.
That's what it comes down to. It's the magnitude in those circumstances. It's if we go down to matchups and where the teams perform throughout the year and certain things. It's Buffalo. It's Buffalo. Yeah. It's not close, but it's still Arrowhead, AFC Championship, Mahomes, Kelce, Reid.
Well, and you mentioned
they know what they're doing.
You mentioned the urgency, and is it urgency or is it pressure? Right? Because for Kansas City, like, been here, done that, done it a million times, looking for a three-peat.
Yeah.
If it is that pressure, or you know what I mean? Like the weight of Buffalo's franchise history and having to wait 4 years to be back in this situation.
Yeah.
Like I think those things, if it breaks Kansas City's way, those will probably be some of the things that you look at with a microscope and say, did this negatively impact who we feel the better team is on the road?
I'll tell you this. I agree with you. If Kansas City loses, shucks, it didn't get to their third straight.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
if the Bills win, that's huge. I thought Peter Bukowski had some really good analysis on the NFL squad shows that drop. He said if Mahomes wins this game and goes to the Super Bowl again, he needs an actual rival, right? I know Josh has certainly like been able to make these games close, but if it's just like Brady and Manning, where Tom won every single time, and then all of a sudden in the fourth matchup, Manning had the breakthrough, and then it was like 10 more years of that rivalry.
I can't do 10 years of this, dude.
Well, I'm hoping for that, but I think it's important, like for the league in some ways, that there is a true rival to Mahomes, because otherwise, what are we doing? Let's just put the Chiefs in the Super Bowl every year, play the NFC games.
We'll give them 17 buys or 18 when they go to 18 games, and then they can just show up as the 1 seed and play the playoff games and be done.
There has to be a consequence for not caring about the regular season. There has to be.
Well, they're pushing the limits of that right now.
Well, yeah, we'll find out. I'm picking the Bills.
For the villain status and being a Dolphins fan, I'll pick the Chiefs, but I agree with everything from an analysis perspective, from a matchups perspective. I think Buffalo has significant advantages, but I'm just going to lean into the bit here as the Dolphins guy and say Kansas City wins.
You didn't do that last week, so.
Well, we'll get into it after the break. I have a thought on why I'm doing this.
Stick with us. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans. And for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80.
I was reflecting on this in the car this morning. I completely ruined the Minnesota Vikings season. Because you did the picks in week 18, and I said, I've been fading them all year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fade them now. And then they lost to Detroit. And then I said, well, I learned my lesson. I'm going to pick the Rams to win in the wildcard round, and the Rams won. So I'm just trying to take that influence that I clearly have over certain teams and see if I have none of it against Buffalo when the Dolphins play the Bills, if a different team, if I have any control in that capacity.
So you did this to manifest the Chiefs win.
Yes.
So I understand that. There's 3 fan bases that exist that are not rooting for Buffalo. It's the Dolphins, it's the Patriots, and it's the Chiefs.
Jets?
I meant to say the Jets. The Patriots are rooting for the Bills. I think that the Patriots fans want to make sure that the Chiefs dynasty is not better than theirs.
Yep.
So, yeah, Jets, Dolphins, and Chiefs are go Chiefs. The rest of the world, yeah. I get it. I understand it. That's fine. It's a good place to be.
There's a misery loves company element that there's a
I'm fine with it.
Pettiness too.
I'm fine with it, and it's the position you want to be in. I can live with it. But you didn't do it last week. Oh, because you're reverse psychology. That's right. Because I know
I'm trying to figure out.
Gotcha. All right.
Where the limits come in if the universe is going to grant me.
I think it's a great experiment. You find out if you can have some control over the Bills. I think that's why not, right?
I'm over so far. Commanders Eagles as our next game. And really interesting. Obviously, a divisional matchup. These teams played twice in the regular season, and they split. I think there might have been 150 points scored the second time they played if Jalen Hurts hadn't got hurt.
Right.
Certainly felt like it was trending that way.
Yeah.
But Washington feels like the hotter team. And I think in some ways it's the inverse of the game that we just did, where I think a lot of the matchups dictate Philly. And they're at home. So I think that's reflected in the spread, which is sitting, is it still 6.5?
6.5.
6.5. But Washington just has the momentum as the team that went to Detroit and beat the Lions. They're a young upstart team where clearly everybody's bought into their culture. They've got a bunch of guys who, instead of there being pressure for Washington, I think all the pressure's on Philly as the higher seeded team and the team that won the division and the team that lost to Super Bowl recently and is trying to get back. Versus Washington, they've outperformed expectations all season long. They're the team that has a bunch of guys who are long in the tooth, really talented individual players who have never had a team that's done anything close to this, and they're here, and it just kind of feels like it's all house money for Washington right now, and I think that they've been playing that way, and they've been playing really loose.
Yeah, I agree, and I think all of that matters a ton. If you believe that football games are won in the trenches, the Eagles got it, man. Right. Cosme's out for Washington's their best offensive lineman. And they get John Allen back. That's a big deal for the defense. But it shouldn't be a fair fight in the trenches. And if that matters, that's a big deal. I do think that Washington has the better quarterback in this game.
Mm-hmm. And that's where this time of year, especially, a player can swing the pendulum of a game at that position.
This will be Jayden Daniels' third matchup against Vic Fangio this year. And what I think is very interesting about what Daniels has done in this postseason run against Tampa and Detroit, this is really an opposite type of defense where you're going to get zone match, you're going to get light boxes. You know, you go against Detroit, it's blitz man coverage in heavy boxes.
Right.
It's like there's, and I thought Jayden did such a good job of like just knowing where to go with the football against Detroit. Is that a little bit more tricky against Philly? Yes. Third matchup, I know, like he was kind of banged up that the second matchup.
Well, I think the loss of Nakobe Dean can be an impactful one for Philadelphia. Obviously, Zach Pawn's got his Superman cape on this year and is a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. And like Philly's got the guys in coverage that can hold their own. But if you're going to get outside of structure, if you're going to take everything and Jayden Daniels is just going to make things happen, like it's the same appeal that exists with Lamar Jackson. And I thought a lot of the best moments that Lamar had against Buffalo last week was that same kind of circumstance.
Yeah.
Where the original design and intent of play has things that are taken away. And he says, okay, well, let me either run to run or run to throw and buy enough time for something to break down. And like that's where, if Washington had a traditional drop back passer and was in this position and everything else was exactly the same, I'd probably pick Philly by 2 touchdowns, even with Jalen Hurts playing the way that he's playing right now. But that's not the world that we're living in.
Yeah. How much do you put into like Washington? This is nuts, right? That they're here. Do you think it matters? Like this would be like the third Eagles NFC Championship game since 2017, right?
Yeah.
This is a normal place. Now, certainly Detroit was the team that went to the NFC Championship game last year. They won that game.
They'd never been in the shoes of, we're the top rated team. We have a bye. We're the top dog in the playoff, right? Like their run last year was, oh, what a fun Cinderella story Detroit is. They hadn't won a playoff game in 30 years.
So is Washington just Detroit last year? And then in this moment, it's like, okay, this is when it gets too big.
And I think there will probably be a point where it does get too big and somebody steps out of line and tries to make too much happen. And it comes back and bites you. But because that was the entire theme of all the games last week was who tries to do too much and makes a mistake that swings the entire momentum of a game on its head. It happened with Mark Andrews and the fumble. It happened with Kyron Williams and his fumble.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can go through Houston. Didn't they had a wonky sequence, if I'm remembering correctly.
Several of them.
And then Washington with the Jared Goff interception when he had a check down underneath and getting close to halftime.
Yeah. So
predictively, who do I think is going to have that moment? It's would I assume be Washington. But I think this is going to be a close game, and I would not be surprised if Washington wins if Jalen Hurts cannot find a pulse throwing the football.
Yeah. I think that's the right outlook, where I'm going to predict Philly to win this game. But as a touchdown favorite at home, I would not be surprised if Washington is able to do this thing.
Yeah.
Is that where you land?
I'm picking Philly, but I'm leery about the Eagles in large part because of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable place to land. Okay, so I have Bills, Eagles. Kyle has Chiefs, Eagles.
Yeah.
All right. Coaching stuff. Got a new head coach for the Jets, the Jaguars. Yeah, we'll talk about that next year. Stick with us. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. And folks, get in on these conference championship games. The Eagles are 6.5-point favorites in that game. The over-under is set at 47.5. Chiefs, 1.5-point favorites at home, 47.5. Also the over-under for that game. So check it out. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
So we have a couple hires, but I wanted to ask you your thought. Like, where are you at with Detroit right now? Because their coaching staff's going to get cleaned out.
Yeah, and that's the deal, right? When you have that type of success and turnaround, everybody wants a piece of it and try to replicate it where they are. And I think that's the challenge that those types of teams have, like a Detroit, is it's not just about replenishing your roster as your players get good and expensive. It's how do you develop your front office and your coaching staff.
Yeah, your coaches.
And I think what complicates that for Dan Campbell is inevitably Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are going to pull some of those guys with them. So it's not just the coordinators.
It's not like you could just promote from within to take the places of the guys that are leaving, because those guys are going to take player or coaches to take promotions within new staffs as well and new opportunities.
Like that D-line coach for Detroit that's now the DC, is he with Vrabel? He went with Vrabel to New England. It's like, oh, well, that guy probably had a chance to be the defensive coordinator in Detroit, right? So
right. Or end up potentially with one of the staffs of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So like you get that on top of.
Yeah.
This is the first time since the Eagles with
Gannon and
Steichen that a team has lost both coordinators to head coaching jobs.
You know that it's not unexpected, right? I mean, this has been a conversation for a while now. So yeah, we'll see what Dan Campbell has figured out. And I think one thing that we should probably give more credit to Dan Campbell for is that offense. You know, I mean, Ben Johnson gets celebrated, but I mean, he's offensive minded. It's his playbook, right? I think that there's that element that gives me some hope, but yeah, they got to get that retooled quickly and nail it. And credit to Dan Campbell. He got it right the first time, right? So it should give you some confidence that he'll make good choices this time around as well.
So we can make this as a transition to the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn. But my final thought on this is, dude, the more I think about it, the more I think from a program development in all phases perspective, I think the Rams might be the gold standard of the league. Think of executives and Les Snead and guys that have come up under Les and got GM jobs, like what happened, what just took place in Detroit, and the different ways that they've gone about team building. And now they're very youth movement draft pick oriented, and from Sean McVay and his coaching tree, and how he's brought up coaches underneath of him and brought coaches back that failed elsewhere. And people are talking about maybe Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator, being a head coaching candidate next year if things go well with how he coached down the stretch. It's just like you look at the roots that have all tied back to the Les Snead, Sean McVay combination. I think it might be the best program development from a player development, coach development, front office development standpoint in the league.
I don't think it's debatable. I don't think you can make an argument that's better for any other team than what the Rams have done in all of those phases.
Yeah.
So it truly is remarkable. And we've had to learn some lessons along the way because maybe I won't speak for you, but I've struggled with that transition over and over and over again and believing that it's going to be okay. And then the seasons even start kind of rocky and it's like,
right.
All right. Yeah, they're done.
But everybody settles in.
Yeah.
And they play hot down the stretch.
Yeah.
So Aaron Glenn, the Jets will aspire to be the next program development place because that would dramatically change the fortunes of this franchise. They make the choice and the hire with Aaron Glenn first and foremost. They obviously have vacancies in both spots. Have to imagine, is it Newmark?
Yeah.
The name for GM there that sounds like it's trending that way.
Right.
But Glenn, I think people will look at the surface level, and it is a concern that I have with this direction that the Jets are going. But you have Aaron Glenn as a first-time head coach, defensive coordinator, culture guy coming in to take over for Robert Saleh, who is a first-time head coach, defensive coordinator, culture guy, who took over for Todd Bowles, who is a first-time head coach, defensive coordinator, culture guy, right? Like, so they're individuals, but they are cut from the same mold as far as their backgrounds, which I think is interesting that this was the landing spot that they landed with the Aaron Glenn hire.
Detaching my Bills fandom. I love it. I love it, man. Aaron Glenn was the kind of the name that I started to gravitate towards, I guess maybe middle of the season or so, and started to gain a big time appreciation for what I believe in terms of leadership and being able to galvanize the operation and the competitive mindset that he brings, the trend of being a player coach that works, has been working lately. I like it all. And where I started to find myself maybe doubting a little bit was seeing the evolution of that team and maybe feeling like Aaron Glenn was a little bit stubborn with his principles and then, maybe not helping an undermanned defensive operation. But what I keep going back to is that I really do believe that a head coach job is we care so much about the scheme or the performance of the unit that they were just dealing with, right? And that's looms large. But, I mean, being a head coach is so much more about leadership and football administration. And I just have a good feel about Aaron Glenn and his mindset and how important that is more than ever in the NFL, as I think personalities and people have changed a lot. I think people like Aaron Glenn are going to give you an edge as the leader and the face of your operation. So I think he feels very much like exactly the right personality for that team right now. There's a lot they got to figure out, but I feel like he's the right guy that can help navigate them through this next era of Jets football that, quite honestly, it's been a dark stretch for the Jets. And I like the idea that he can come in and really set a good foundation for them to build from. I'm big on this hire. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I think so too. Team who did not make a hire.
Well, they can't.
They tried. Liam Cohen said thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
And this is where, for me,
this is about the Jaguars, folks.
Jacksonville.
Yeah.
From all the reports that came out, the feedback that was given to owner Shad Khan, the entire buildup to the end of the season was that you have to completely wipe the slate clean, start over, or else you are going to have a hard time hiring a quality candidate to fill your head coaching role if you try to marry them to Trent Baalke. And it sounded like, based off the reporting, that was universally understood within this organization until it came time to make the decision. And Shad said, we're going to keep Trent Baalke and we're going to hire a new coach. And the widely reported, this is a team, mind you, that had a former number 1 overall pick at quarterback who just got a contract extension that everybody wants to believe is going to make the breakthrough and live up to his full potential. This should be a very attractive quarterback based off of his skills, what he flashes on tape, for top-minded offensive coaches to come want to work with and be like, the hardest part's done. We got the quarterback.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to believe that to be true. And I think you'd be well within your right to believe that with Trevor Lawrence. Their top 2 options, as it's been reported, are off the market now. Ben Johnson took the Chicago job, and Liam told him to kick rocks, to stay as the offensive coordinator in Tampa because of the dynamics of trying to be married to Trent Baalke. And now you decide to mutually agree to part ways with Trent Baalke, where now you're on option C at best. It's just a total fumble for something that was so well established for forever. The 33rd team put out a graphic. Like the last 10 coaches that have been hired and one and done in the NFL, 3 of them have been hired by Trent Baalke.
Mm.
How do you start talking? Because I'm going to start talking crazy.
I was enjoying that. I thought you were what do the kids say? You were dropping bars. Dude, it's better late than never, but this was so obvious to anybody that's paid attention, except for Shad Khan. And I think Shad Khan's Rolodex, or lack thereof, is becoming quite obvious. And I don't think that he has a lot of connections in the league, and kind of felt like he had to stay the course. I mean, that's how you hire an Urban Meyer. That's how you hire a Trent Baalke. That's how you stay committed to a Trent Baalke. And all that it took even to dismiss Urban Meyer it's extremely goofy. And so obviously this is the best thing. And now they got a big job. They got to find a GM and a head coach, and they're certainly going to be not their preferred choices. There's still great candidates out there. I mean, they could land a Joe Brady, a Florida native, right? Maybe he likes to go work with Trevor Lawrence, or, whatever other Robert Saleh, and maybe, I mean, it'd be hard to go from one dumpster owner to another dumpster owner, but I mean, at least this sets the course forward for us to not have to watch the inevitable settle for some coach that isn't worth the job to work with Trent Baalke, only to be back in this position very, very soon, within a year or two. So it's better late than never, but obviously a massive black eye.
Yeah. So we'll see. But names now kind of attached to this job. Like, who do you think's in the running for a hire here? I know we got to get out of here, but I mean, Robert Saleh's flying down for an in-person interview. I wouldn't hate the hire of Robert Saleh, but like,
yeah, that feels like
if that's where this ends, then you failed at the objective of trying to make the hire to help Trevor Lawrence take his next step as a quarterback.
Yeah, it's a great call out, because you saw Robert Saleh try to navigate that, and couldn't, not only the position but also the support, right? It was,
and they had a good offensive coordinator in LaFleur,
yeah,
who leaves and smells like roses again.
Yeah, Joe Brady as well, I think, is certainly. I mean, but who knows? I mean, I love what Joe Brady's done in Buffalo. I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea what type of leader or football administrator he's going to be. So
it'd be tough to see how they pivot, but they will pivot, and we are pivoting our way out of here. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Crabbs, he's Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys as always for checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We're back tomorrow with Takes on Takes.